Hello and welcome again to Indiepocalypse Radio, the radio show where my microphone is always 100% at the proper levels. I'm your host Andrew. I'm the creator, editor, all that stuff. Whatever the things you can do with Indiepocalypse, I do them. Besides make the games and the covers, the organizer, the whatever. It doesn't matter. Indiepocalypse being, of course, the monthly anthology of games. Alternative games is what I'm going with. I'm thinking about underground more often, but like, what does that even mean? I mean, that's the thing. When you're going for alternative independent labels, you're always just kind of chasing some other new arbitrary label until it gets co-opted by people with more money than is humanly possible. With that all said, welcome to the show. This is the show, of course, where we talk to people that are usually inside of Indiepocalypse, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're just unrelated other people, as we have this week. But starting off, our first guest. You may know, of course, you may know these developers from well outside their work at Indiepocalypse. Indiepocalypse is kind of like a small footnote, I like to think, is part of these developers. But that is, you may know our first developer from issue. What is this? Oh no, I lost my thing. I think it's 10 or 11. It's been so long. There. Oh, I closed my browser. That's bad. Issue 12, I was very close. Issue 12 of Indiepocalypse with 10 Mississippi. It's Karina Pop. Karina, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing good. I'm happy to be here.
Glad to have you here. Uh, I've been in my kind of house cleaning phase of guests, where I'm just like, I usually ask people towards the beginning of when they start, and then I'll ask them a couple more times. And now in my giant spreadsheet, I'm like, if anyone's got a red mark that hasn't answered, I'm cleaning house. They're just gone forever. And I've had a shocking number of, and I say the shocking in a very positive way, people, hey, they actually got back to me this time, and it's glad to happen, you know?
Yeah, no, I can't speak to other people,
Yeah.
but for me, I think it was like pandemic time, like
Yes.
unable to go through my emails at some points.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm glad you reached out again.
It is,
Because
I
it's cool.
assumed it was one of those things where people.
Yeah.
I think there were two modes. There's two pandemic email modes where it's I'm glad to have any contact with another human being, or or all of my contact is through email and I never want to see another email again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but yes, no, glad to have you on the show. To start it off, if people are unfamiliar with 10 Mississippi, in the shortest form of saying, what is 10 Mississippi?
Uh, 10 Mississippi is a uh stop motion photography game about just a very mundane day told in like 10-second increments where
Yeah.
you just do a small interaction at that day.
Yes, it is a what was it? Trying to think of what year it was. I don't remember, but prime IGF Nouveau material.
Yeah, it was 2018, I think. Maybe.
Sounds about
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I because I did I should know this. I did a write up recently about that kind of thing.
I,
Because
I should know it. I made it.
right,
It's weird
yeah.
that I don't know.
Because I was like, this last year, I'm like, there's like four games in here that were in the zine. Were there any in the past? And it was a couple. There was you and I think like Jeremy Clark and Resin Jars, I believe,
Mm.
but not with exact games. But anyway, yes, I was talking to someone the other day, and they were talking about one of their friends. It was Resin Jars actually that were in one of the IGF Nouveaux, and they were watching it, and they were like, the presenter was like, "No, these games are weird," and it's like it's that weird thing where I think the reason I reach out to people, you were one of the people I reached out to. Yes,
Yeah.
I like that sounds weird at first, but that is the correct tense for that. Um, I feel like these specific kind of like meaningful, well done art house games kind of get noms and a couple blog posts, and then where do they go? You know?
Yeah, that's kind of I think what happens like in the moment. And no, yeah, like you're talking like the presenter at the IGF for the Nuova being like, "Oh,
Yeah.
these are the weird games." Like that's how it feels like the whole week. Like you're like, uh, you might not even think this is a game. Like the person that you're talking to might be like weird about it.
Right.
But I think the kind of cool thing that has like been nice about the experience after releasing 10 Mississippi is that like people who really care or are interested in this kind of work will just reach out periodically, like you, or like the other week, like a photographer in Madrid reached out and was like, "Hey, I'm like just doing a show about games made with photos. Can I include 10 Mississippi?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah." Like it in the moment, like at the time, it's very like anticlimactic because not a lot of people are super into stuff like this, but
Right.
it's cool that like I get to kind of have these connections over time of people
Yeah.
interested in that kind of work.
I think the what you described is what I think is kind of like the better fate of sort of art house games is that you have to go through video games first, you know?
Yeah.
But then once you get out of video games, you realize that the people who tend to care the most are usually like traditional arts world, like galleries and museums and that sort of thing. But it's like, how do you get your video? Like, how would you get a video game in front of that traditionally? It's like
Yeah,
a
it's tough.
because it's like it's not the space where there is like a what is it? I feel like some. It's not the MoMA, or is it the MoMA? There was a museum in New York recently that had
Yeah.
like an interactive gallery like exhibition. I think.
Yeah, they do. So they have like a permanent collection,
Okay.
and then I think they did another uh uh exhibit recently. I think that's still going on. I haven't been. I should.
Right.
Um but yeah, like there are definitely people that are open to, you know, showing these kind of things and I guess more like mainstream art formats. I don't want to sound like I'm like I want I want
Yeah.
like I want like the approval of like art people, but like it's cool because it does give you access to just like regular people that are just like at the MoMA or like just like walking by some gallery and maybe they go in and like they are not a video game person and it's exciting to like think about like allowing people to see games in a different light,
Yeah.
like my grandfather like is like vaguely aware of the existence of Fortnite, right? And like
Right.
so
Right.
thinking about like people like my grandfather, like I don't know, is he in the MoMA one day and he's like, wow, what is getting over it with Bennett Foddy? What's going on there? Why is it
Yeah.
in a museum?
Right. Right.
Um,
Because that's the thing. You may have a grandfather who has like a deep lifelong appreciation of art and thinks video games are something like Fortnite.
yeah,
And yeah, and there's like, and video game conventions, don't lend themselves to think games without goals. or
yeah, it's weird. It's super weird. Like a lot of people that like when you try to move from the game space and move to like more like digital media or just like art space, like kind of don't get it if there's not like points or
right,
or like a clear like you win you lose thing. Um, and I get like asked that a lot. Like where are the points? Like what is the goal? What are the rules? What are the meaningful choices?
right,
And I'm
yes,
like I don't know. I don't know.
yeah. There is that strange like obsession with choice in general of like I have to be able to shape the narrative.
Yeah.
uh,
I am not not down with that with 10 Mississippi. It's like
no,
anti making
right.
choices.
Right.
Yeah.
Ten Mississippi is like the opposite end of the spectrum of like you're being forced into all of these other choices. Like,
Listen to me. Look at what I want you to see. Yeah.
yes. And you have to experience it the way there is like, and like that's, heightened by the fact that it's just real images.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And that's, it's a weird thing that games have that like, obviously you don't decide, when you get scared that the person in the horror movie is going to go through the door, you can't actually tell them not to go through the door, and they won't listen to you. But there's because of the way we interface with games and they're interactive, we expect more. We, I say, but like game players expect more than being able to just um, go along for the ride, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And I get that.
Yeah.
You know, you I think a lot of like people get excited, about the possibility space, and I can totally see how it gets disappointing as well, kind of like on the flip side to feel those choices limited and that space limited.
Yeah, yeah, because if you're coming from this idea of like video games or Skyrim, they're
Yeah.
they're giant toy boxes that I play around in, then them not being giant toy, which of course, what no one person is going to ever make Skyrim.
Yeah.
And
I could
like,
try. I'm gonna make Skyrim in photographs. That's
oh,
my decided next project right now. That's what I'm
I
gonna do.
I hope you're taking photographs right now because
Yes.
you'll need to. You'll need a lot. There is like, uh, I mean, that push the. I was thinking about that recently. I was talking to someone privately. Um, if you believe you can do that and talk to people without making content, uh, about art and like the way games have that kind of longer. What's the word I'm looking for? There's more stuff to do before you can start even making a game.
Mm.
Like, did you come from like a programming background in doing this, or?
Not at all. So like I went like the most obnoxious roundabout way of getting here, I feel like. So I got a master's degree in game design.
Okay.
And prior to that, like I was really interested in doing game studies, just like very academic. Like eventually I wanted to get my PhD and sort of like pursue researching games and the spaces around games.
Yeah.
And I was kind of convinced at the time that I was like, I need to know how games are made
That
in
seems
order
like it
to
would help.
do that. Yeah, no, it was like I didn't like have any evidence because like
Yeah.
I did reading prior. I didn't have any evidence, but I just kind of felt like there was like this disconnect between the terminology and the ideas behind game design and then the way some people were writing about game design. And so I was like, when I applied to graduate school, I applied to one game design master's program at NYU, and I got in and I went there still fully like assuming I'm gonna be like a professor, elbow patch thing in the
Right.
future. But I found out like I really like making games because that's the focus of the program. They have game studies classes, like you do have to like write papers, and I did get the chance to like present papers and stuff. But uh, I was like, oh no, like making things is really cool.
Yeah. It's the
Yeah,
the siren call of art. He's like, oh, I could just make
yeah, oh
art.
no. So I learned everything like in those 2 years, like programming, like making art assets, like visual art, a little bit of like sound design, all game design stuff. And then have since mostly just been like trying to maintain that sort of a like self-learning
Yeah.
of everything. So I come from a background of nothing and became like a jack of all trades type
That.
thing.
Yeah, and I think the benefit is becoming faster to do that.
Mm.
Like tools are getting easier and more resources are there because what you're saying is like it's easier to like if you want to make a film, especially now, it's easier to point a camera at something. And I mean, not saying you'll ever be good at it in any way, but
Yeah.
it's easier than being like, I want to make a video game, and you're like, I have to figure out how to draw graphics to a screen before I can even like there's so many, there's this weird like barrier to just design, but also there's the benefit of you can just kind of the secret of, especially if you're doing it on a personal computer, the keyboard can do a lot of different things. So
Man.
you're not really restricted to what you think games are supposed to control. Like.
Yeah. It's and the tools in general are, I think, really accessible.
Yeah,
I think I don't know, it gets I don't know, the space gets more and more interesting every year the more I hear about like people who are self-taught or like coming from a different field making games and just like using what they can find online. It's just really cool.
yeah.
um
I've entered this weird space where I've been doing this long enough. I mentioned you were in issue 12. We're up to 42 is coming out
Wow.
in 2 weeks. Um, like it's just like, oh, now since I've started, people have been learning game development. There are probably people who are in recent issues that had not made a game back when I started doing this, and it's like, oh yeah, there's like so much to this world of like game design, and people are getting into it like more and more every day.
Yeah. I mean, so this is at the time it blew my mind. You wrote like a piece earlier in the year about 10 Mississippi and Maps of the Known World by
Oh
Joey
yes,
Schutz.
yeah.
Uh,
I very very coincidentally featured 10 Mississippi back to back in two articles just because it happened. I had that double feature in mind, and then I'm like, oh, it's also in the IGF Nouveau.
well, I mean,
Yeah,
I was gonna say specifically about that. Like,
yeah.
Joey was my TA for like a class
Oh,
when I started
weird.
teaching, and I was like, oh wow, like mm, seeing that article like 2 years later, like drawing a connection between the thing that I made and then the thing that this person that was now making games made. I don't know, thought it was cool. I don't know,
Yeah,
exciting stuff.
I didn't even know that. I come across all these weird connections occasionally because the world of game design is massive and tiny in some ways at the same time.
Yeah.
So that is a fascinating way to like think of things that huh, I didn't even do that on purpose.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's cool.
And like I don't even know if like his relation to like being a TA was like inspired him at all to make Maps of the Known World. If that was just another like coincidental space of like I'm gonna also work in
Yeah,
real media to make my
things
game.
happening. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very. Although I do know that I do have the general feeling that at some point, Indiepocalypse slowly percolated through NYU in some ways, at least among students. Of like, oh, here's a place where you can submit weirdo games and get money for it.
I I don't know for sure, but that
Yeah,
wouldn't surprise me. It's definitely like the vibe that a lot of students at NYU go for and
yeah, it's a
transfer.
vibe
Yeah,
I encourage and I like, and but also it's a vibe that's not very what's the word commercially viable.
that is correct. Yes.
uh, uh, 10 Mississippi. When is your Switch release for 10 Mississippi?
Oh, good question. uh,
When?
I wish. I wish.
Yeah. When is the VR version so I can get truly immersive?
I I actually struggled with this a lot at the time of releasing it.
Yeah.
There was like a sort of a question if I was gonna charge for it or not. And I do like have like a donation button on the itch page, but it's just like a HTML5 like web game
Right.
because that's what I was into. But I had like designers I really respected, like really going hard, try to convince me basically that like the best way to sort of almost like charging for the game gave it more legitimacy and that I should charge it and figure out what that cost would be because
Right.
people will take it more seriously if I do. Um, but I just like wasn't I wasn't convinced. Like I was like I don't I would rather people just play it and even if it's
Yeah.
less people in the end and they don't take it super seriously because I'm not asking for like 99 cents or whatever. I guess I'm okay with that. Um, but it would be nice to have money. That would be
Yes.
that would be a cool thing.
That's the secret to life. It's just always nice to have more money. Uh, yeah. Try to have it both ways. Like that is part of the initial reason I did Indiepocalypse is like if I put these games in a bundle that costs money, they'll people will start to think, oh, I should pay money for
Mm,
these shorter, like sometimes 10-minute long games. Like content, even content aside of any like, even if you made like a game where you were a little guy who ran around and collected points, if that little guy only ran around for 10 minutes, people would be like, no, I'm not paying it 10 minutes for a video game. Uh, but I also have it both ways because I just linked everyone's stuff. So there's nothing stopping you from just like going to the Indiepocalypse page and then just going to play 10 Mississippi for free, on your page. I like
yeah,
to,
no, totally. I think I don't know the sort of like work that Indiepocalypse is doing in that way, I think is important. Even if in the end you can just like find the games for free, like legitimizing
Yeah.
this idea of like the 10-minute little guy running around game is worth something. Like somebody put labor into that, and it's an experience.
Right. Right.
Um,
I love 2 minute songs. You know, I've listened to them plenty of
yeah,
times. Like
yeah,
the curse of art is that the length and the money you spend on it doesn't equal its quality.
yeah, yeah.
And so it's like I'm sorry, EA. Sometimes a person spent a week on a game that's better than the game you spent $4 million on. I can't do anything about that. That's just what life is. Like if people will, you know, how many people like are obsessed with like home recorded albums, you know, on tape decks, and like compared to giant studio releases. You know, it's just
Yeah.
People like people, and when people see people, they love to see people in art.
Yeah.
It's how we're full of big complex ideas in our brain, and sometimes we can express them in art in a way that we could never say.
Absolutely. That's my feeling, definitely. I sort of like explain it as like I want to make things that can say the thing I'm thinking back to me, and like I do desperately hope other people can understand it, but like
Right.
if they don't, it's okay. Like I'm all right.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to communicate something, and sometimes like the only way I can do that is through a railroaded photography stop motion game.
Yeah. But then you realize, oh, you took all those photos. You decided all the
Yeah.
scenes that you're gonna play. It's all like very intentional.
Mm,
And it's easy to forget that it's like, oh, people do things, you know, very intentionally.
yeah.
And it's not kind of like these games do not come out of the ether.
Right. They're humans that make them.
You
Yeah.
spent, you know, between 6 hours and 6 years of their life on something.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of the people that do that. Ideally, closer to the 6 hours is what I'm aiming for, so people don't. That's like one of the other things. It was like there was a certain bleakness to like as I was, you know, before this I was making games and I was not great at it. It started partially because of like when I started getting better, I was like, oh, I'm getting better at this. I'm like, oh, but I want to make money, but the kind of games I also want to make don't make money. What if I brute force the market into existence?
I will I will make the market, and then I will return and I will
Yeah,
make the money. And I'll get to make the games I want. A genius plan.
the true.
Genius.
It hasn't worked yet.
Okay. It'll
the,
get there.
I don't think the market's there yet, but I like to think of that poisoning young minds into thinking, huh, I can pay $10 for weird art games? Huh. You say
Yeah.
there's more to buying in games and battle passes in Fortnite? Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that it's a whole. But seeing people working on the exact same game year after year after year for like 6 years or whatever, and then looking at Steam charts or something and being like, six people are playing this game. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
It's just like such a huge gamble that I think that's why why it burns so many people out constantly.
Definitely. It's like a trope at this point. Like
Yeah.
you especially like coming like thinking back to like the early like 2010s that really got this idea in people's heads of like I have the best game idea. I am going to make this game, um, and spend years and years on it, savings on it and stuff, and then like finding in the end you're burnt out, you're tired. You invested so much into this and you realized you were doing sunk cost fallacy for like at least the last 2 years, and things aren't turning out like you wanted, and that sucks. It's really
Yeah.
hard. I think smaller things are definitely more sustainable for, I think, just human beings.
Right.
Uh, yeah.
There's like, that's why most things most pieces of art do not take that long, like on average. Even like big movies do not take very long to make. When I realized like, oh, shooting movies film in like a month or whatever. They don't take very long to physically film in a lot of cases. And then,
Yeah.
but
I
it's
think
like,
there was like a producer at some company AAA company that was like, consumers need to get used to the fact that like games are going to take like 5 years to develop from now on.
Right.
And I genuinely do like a lot of like your standard AAA games. Like I will play an Assassin's Creed. I will play your Zeldas.
Yes.
Um, it's
Yeah.
a bummer to hear like pending 5 years, like what that can do to a worker.
Right.
Sounds
And I don't
tough.
think it's like healthy that 5 years is like, oh, that's a healthy development life cycle.
Right,
Um,
yeah.
no, that's probably 5 years, plenty of crunch in it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's not like 5 years and we plan this well, like you're gonna have a work-life balance. It's 5 years
Yeah.
and you're still gonna be crunching every
Right.
2 weeks or whatever. Yeah.
Not 5 years of a nice, relaxing 9 to 5
Yeah.
with ample lunch breaks and everything. No, it's
Yeah.
5 years of extended weekends, 11-hour work days. Uh, yes, most movies have unions. Yes. Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of like not just most movies, like almost every production role in film has a union, or a
Yep.
guild or something. It's all SAG and the WGA and IATSE and the DGA and every other one that I don't know of because I'm not a Hollywood
Film person.
insider,
Yeah.
but I do know those ones. Uh,
Yeah, and I think, having that kind of model in that big game space or just game space in general of unions or guilds or something
yeah,
to protect workers would, I think, go a long way to like making that cycle more sustainable. And I also think like probably better games.
yeah,
Not that that should be important. Like the important part is the human aspect of like
right,
taking care of people, making sure people are well cared for. But I do kind of like think a side benefit is that I like to think that the games would be better in the end.
yeah. I think it doesn't benefit people to like be constantly burned out, and that's how you get like people that stick around.
Yeah, exactly. And like
uh,
have the knowledge and the
and,
know-how of what they're doing. Yeah.
and you have like teams that like regularly work together because 90% of the team didn't get laid off or just fried completely.
Yeah. Yes.
But speaking of getting laid off, we're gonna lay off this segment. Which is to say, believe it or not, our time has come to an end. While I'm finding a GIF here because there's no longer songs about building and food, so I can't use my buildings and food one. I need to find a more neutral. Here we go. This guy's always neutral. But yes, thank you for being here on the show. Thank you for allowing your game to be within Indiepocalypse and for just making games in general.
Thanks for having me.
I'm gonna be back on the better half of where's my little guy? Here it is. On the better half of 1 minute and 27 seconds. But until then, goodbye. Hello and welcome back to Indiepocalypse Radio. That was Milk Banana with Ketchup Mess. We are here with our next guest, who is I teased them ahead of time of people who have nothing to do with Indiepocalypse, which happens on occasion, and that is Ben Reichstein from Wolf Sound Design. Ben, how are you doing today?
Pretty great. How about you?
I'm doing good. So I'm going to ask you right at the top, important question. How did you hear about Indiepocalypse?
Yeah, I mean, I heard about it when you emailed me.
Okay.
I was like,
Okay. So
this
what?
is interesting.
So double question then. How did you hear about? Because you had filled out the like, I'll be on this radio show. How did you hear about the radio show then? Do you fill out the
No,
form?
I mean, I saw the thing on Twitter and thought like, oh, that sounds interesting, and I just put my information in, and then I somehow forgot about it. It was like a busy day, and it seemed interesting, and I did like a bunch of tasks, and this was also a task I did. So after I got your email, I'm like, oh, nice. How did he find out about me? And then I looked it up, but then I remembered, yeah, I filled out the form.
Yes.
So yeah, I checked it out, and yeah, it's amazing. I mean, just got blown away by all the different games and all the different styles, and yeah, just the depth of it. Yeah, I like underground stuff, so.
Oh yes, no that is I teased it earlier, but that is kind of maybe a phrase I'm leaning towards. I've been using alternative a lot lately.
Yeah, I mean, whatever phrase you use. I mean, it's just at the end, it's, I would say like just cool art from from so many different people, and that's always interesting because everyone has their different like point of view and their different voice, and so yeah.
Right. Everyone has like such a different approach all the time. Like it's all about getting different. And you know, still doing this monthly, 10 issues a month. You can still like, there's no shortage of having a wildly varied issue each month, which is it's easy to not realize that there is such a huge breadth of game design and games being made right now, and there always will be. It's like, but enough about.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, there's as you already like talked about, there's always new people coming. As you talked about, like maybe some people that had the first episode or the first issue of Indiepocalypse now learn to program and now like submitting their games. So it's like a cycle of getting always fresh content, and it's getting easier to get into game content and so many different tools to use. So yeah.
Yeah, it's but speaking of game content and game work, Ben, tell me about Wolf's sound design. Just I guess suppose more generally your own work.
Yeah, so I would say I would categorize myself as like a sound artist. So I do sound design for mainly games, and I have a strong focus on field recording and Foley work. So I like to go out in nature or in abandoned mine shafts or some other crazy places and record like real life sounds and bring them into games, and also experiment a lot. So I'm a big nerd with microphones, so I have many different microphones, stuff I can like throw into the water and record underwater sounds or record electricity, stuff like that. So I'm always trying to find something new there. And I'm also doing a little bit of music, not that much because that's where I started, and then found out I actually like the sound design part most of making music, like making those crazy sounds. So
yeah, that's like field recordings and kind of like what I guess you would say traditional Foley work in general. I think is kind of something. It's like it's a large space that you can people might not even realize exists sometimes.
Absolutely.
Unless you're like a real Bandcamp sicko and you get like, here's July's best field recording ambient albums, which they do, which is like fascinating and cool. But and like there's like, it reminds you that there's a lot of spaces and that sound is everywhere.
Absolutely. And when you start to listen, and then especially when you start to listen with microphones and realize after you recorded something and then listen to it back home at your computer, you feel like there's something different and maybe even something new you didn't hear before while you were in that space. And that is always exciting to me, because even now I can listen back to recordings from like months or even years ago and can find something interesting and new in there. Especially if it's like longer recordings, like you said, like those ambient albums. Even those are oftentimes just like an excerpt of longer listening periods. There are sound artists out there that go on to record like 10 hours or something, or like leave the recorder overnight and have like a 24-hour recording and then go through it and like just submerge themselves into that. And some soundscapes really just like with like slow evolving music, it really just comes to you if you're willing to listen and take the time and submerge yourself into it and give it the space it needs. So those things are very interesting to me, and that's why I also, by the way, also have a podcast on the side and started a podcast about those field and Foley stuff, because I mean, sound design or sound work in general is like a niche of game audio, but then there's also the niche of field recording and Foley.
Yeah.
And at first I didn't expect much from it, but people really seem to enjoy it, and even people that don't have anything to do with sound, because as you said, most people aren't aware of that, and then they get some interesting stories from people that have been doing that for many, many years, or worked on like big movies or on small projects or whatever, and have like interesting stories to tell. And also their recordings is always interesting. You have like recordings from the Amazons, or I had a guest once that had a recording from an abandoned World War II freighter where he could like just walk around in the ship and record stuff. It was like a museum piece, but he got access to it, so you have those inside ambient sounds that normal people don't get to hear. So
Yeah.
there's always something new and interesting, and it's just fascinating to me.
Right. To just sort of now your approach? Do you do a lot of long? I guess I imagine you probably do a mix, but do you do a lot of just very long? I'm going to place something down recordings, or
It depends. It depends on what I'm looking for. I mean, normally because I'm working in game audio and I have, at least most of the time, I have some goal. But oftentimes with field recording, you go out, and even if you have a goal, you should always like be open to everything going wrong, because you can like arrive there and then it's like pouring rain and you wanted to hear the quiet forest, so then it's not possible. Or you have like some traffic noises, or you have something like unexpected, something doesn't work. So just what I like to do is when I go out, and if I don't find the thing I'm looking for, then I'm looking and exploring the space and listening to stuff, and like just as I said, like climbing up mountains or going into the woods and finding spaces and interesting spaces from an audio perspective. So I'm keeping my ears open more than my eyes. Just walking around, and then when I'm in a spot and I think, oh, that's nice, like here's this wind blowing through this cave or at this rock, or those trees are creaking or stuff like that, and then I'm setting up and recording stuff.
Yeah, because I imagine it's harder to. It'd be very difficult to like see and be like, that looks like an interesting sounding tree from 100 yards away.
Yeah, absolutely. Or even on photographs, like if you're looking for stuff like, I see an interesting river, but how does it sound? And sometimes the stuff that doesn't look that interesting can sound very amazing.
Right.
And the other way around. And also, I mean, on photos, you see like, oftentimes you see like maybe a nice river or something, but you don't know, is there like a highway next to it, and it's like very noisy and you don't hear the river at all. So it's a different beast, but that's also why it's exciting to me, and it's
right.
It leads you to explore and to enjoy nature. So
it's do you do any kind of the, do you do much of the sort of studio Foley style where you're like, how can I make this watermelon, this glove sound like something, or that kind of artificial style?
Absolutely. I've been stabbing like melons or pumpkins. I mean, always nice. Always nice when it's pumpkin season, because you can record some very nice gory sounds. Like
I was gonna say
breaking and stuff like that. I do a lot of those stuffs too, and also always like if I'm doing sound design for a video game, I try to like make my own sound library, because if you're using like many different sound libraries, especially I've seen that in small indie projects where people are not aware of sound, they just mix and match and get stuff together, and it sounds, most of the time it sounds rather decent, but it's like sometimes, especially if you have an ear for it, it's very different quality,
right?
Very varied sound, and it doesn't like really fit. And if you do your own stuff, then you have at least unique sounds that no one else has.
Yeah.
And you can make sure everything has like this consistent voice and quality and tone. And that's why I'm also like doing footsteps myself. Oftentimes, if it's like a really immersive game where this is like important and you hear them, or as I said, I step melons or I do some weird experiments. Everything that's not much of a safety hazard. I don't do explosions, unfortunately.
You're right. Well, that seems more expensive.
All the permits and all that stuff, and you need to be a professional. So I buy those libraries and I use those stuff, but then I add my own stuff to it, like falling debris or stuff like that. You can do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, because that's.
And I also.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. And I also do a lot of experimenting. Like I mentioned, I have this underwater microphone, which is essentially, I don't know if you're aware of contact microphones. You could put it on surfaces and you can record the vibrations of them. So even if you would like scream right next to it, you won't hear anything.
Right.
Just like the vibrations of the surface it's attached to. And those things are also in a variant with a shielded coating, and you can like put it on the water. But what you also can do is like just put it in water and put it in the freezer and let it like freeze.
Okay.
And then let the ice thaw, so you can hear the ice cracking from inside the ice.
Oh.
And stuff like that. Like just crazy experiments, just trying everything. And it's just been fun for, I think it's over 6 years now that I'm doing this, and I've not been bored yet of trying to find new stuff, and I always
because that's the I mean that's the secret. I don't think I'm not gonna make. I don't know if I'm making a bold claim here, Ben, but I don't think in your lifetime you're gonna find every sound that exists.
No, most definitely not. No.
I think that's
And also techniques. I mean, it's also
Yeah.
not just sounds. It's also if you start to like really get into it and have maybe a couple of microphones or know people and can just record a sound with like 4 very different microphones, and you realize how amazingly different that sounds. And then even then now, if you go into that stuff that you can't hear, which is an area that I'm trying to explore now in the next probably 2 or 3 years, we will see, like ultrasonics or something. You can,
Right.
you can record sounds that you can't hear with your ear. So you have like superhuman hearing, and then you have this whole other world opening up, and you like suddenly can hear like ants talking and crawling, or whatever, like bats call, or even elephants calls are too low to register. So if you hear them calling like those very low notes, and you can record them with very special equipment, then you can pitch them up. So it's not exactly the same, but you can make him audible, and then it's like
Right.
another world opens up.
No,
It's
yeah,
amazing.
it's like the closest thing to creating a sound that it's because you can't change human ears, but you can.
Yeah.
A computer can recognize and change a sound.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah. There's this huge space for potential for sound design, and yeah, I was thinking a lot about what you said about like people not having like voices for their sounds, like a consistent voice but like yeah, and how you very much can have a lot of good sounds individually, but together like don't sound like they go together well, or don't sound like they mix well, which is kind of like in the same way that I'm sure if you were to just be outside in a forest, you could hear different forest sounds and you'd be like, well, this one does not sound like it comes from this forest at all.
Yeah.
Like it, there's you can take for granted the kind of, and I bet like being regularly in that space and regularly like doing audio recordings gives you, or ambient recordings gives you a better like sense, like a better ear for that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Of like what sounds better together, or what sounds more.
Yeah, and then you can make a conscious decision of if you want to like even make this discord of sounds not sounding the same. I mean,
right.
That's a lot of sound design in horror games, for example, do exactly that. You're like in a house, and you hear like creaks, and you hear like maybe like some ghostly whispers and stuff like that. And then there's this one sound you hear, and you're like, I don't know what it is, but I know it's not like a sound a house makes, and it's
yes.
somewhat off-putting, and it's somewhat creepy. And if you can like find those sounds that are like no one can really know what it is, then that's like a big thing of horror games. That's something I always notice in horror game tropes. But also like you can play with emotions with sounds. You can completely change the scene with just the sound editing. I mean, music, for example, of course, is also a big part of sound, and we all know like the emotional impact of music. But the same thing is like with sounds. For example, when I tell people about this, I always use the example of a door can like sound inviting, or it can sound menacing. It can sound broken, or it can sound like very new. And you might not recognize it, but if you hear like those doors and everything that sounds very new, then it gives you subconsciously like a more of an idea of what this place is. So it's well maintained, or it's new and it's cleaned, or it's old and it's rusty and it's maybe abandoned, just from like the sound of the first door opening.
Right.
And those things are very interesting to me, especially the subconscious and the psychological effects of sound. There are so many techniques to like mess with your mind with sound. It's also like a great area to go into.
Yeah, like you can build an entire like. You could just give someone like a sound of a door, or a sound of foot on the floor, and just like these different sounds, and tell them to like design a house, and you can audioly design a house. Playing with people's understanding of like what sounds are, or the vibes of sound, and it's like it's an important space to work in. I think, especially on smaller scale, I think it's sometimes easier for people to just go, I need door.wave. I go to freesound.org and get door.wave, which.
And I mean, it's totally fine, and I'm glad that
Yeah.
like stuff like free sounds exists, because that allows people to quickly like put a lot of sounds in their game, and they most of the time also sound decent. Just like I said, so that's a
Yeah.
great starting point. But if you like go more into it, not just the sounds, but also what's oftentimes a problem in indie games, and maybe people are getting more aware of that, is like you have different sounds with different reverbs, so they don't fit in the same room, and that's also something. Not just the sound itself, but the reverb of it.
Right.
And the reverb is like the biggest thing. I mean, nowadays we do a lot of that stuff in engines, but yeah, even then, if you have your reverb in engine for the specific sound for the specific room, but then you get a sound in that has like clearly a different like long echo or something, or an off-putting thing that sounds like a bathroom, maybe you don't notice it like right away, but subconsciously people like realize that doesn't fit, and in their head, like it breaks the immersion a bit always. So yeah.
Yeah, and it could be one of those things that some people will pick up on like automatically, like instantly. It's just sort of a thing that connects. They're like, oh, something about this is off. Whether it's like maybe you were testing with speakers and then someone wearing headphones just hears it so much closer.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a huge breadth to what a sound does. And so speaking of video games, yeah, video games, right? What is your relation been to video games? Do you like those things?
I don't know. For like, I think the last 30 years.
Yeah.
No, 32 years. No, even more. Oh man, I think. Yeah, I mean, around 30 years ago, I started playing video games.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really in love with video games. And to give you like a brief history, I always wanted to be a video game programmer. And
Okay.
then I thought in my youth, like, I can't be like a video game programmer, because I mean those jobs weren't like really popular or like advertised, and there wasn't like a lot of them. So then I started to go into programming, because that logic and the computer stuff interested me. And I always thought, man, I can't do video games because it's like a job for grown-ups, and it's like a big thing, and you need like a big company. And I'm in Germany, so all the video games I play are from the US or from Japan, so there's no video games here. I had no idea. And so I was a programmer for a very long time, and I always loved games. I always played games. And I think like 8 years ago or something, or 7 years ago, I decided to learn music mixing, because I'm also like a huge fan of very different styles and types of music.
Yeah.
And I wanted to explore more in that space, and maybe do it as a hobby, and maybe make some tracks myself. And I really liked that. But as I told you, like, that's why I find out like not the mixing or like not the music was my interest, but the sound design and like shaping sounds, changing sounds. And then I got into this modding project, and the Skyrim modding project, called Skywind, that's recreating Morrowind and Skyrim. And Morrowind was one of my favorite games as a teenager, so I was like all into that.
Yeah.
And I just like sent my first sound exploration stuff in, like, hey, this is what I can do. Can I like take part in this project? And yeah, then I've been doing that for a few years, and actually then becoming like the team lead for the sound effects team, and like worked on that a couple of years. And from then on it started, and then I branched out into other companies, and now I'm like doing sound design as my own like little company, still on the side, but it's getting more and more. And since about 6 months or 7 months now, I've been working for 3D Realms, which was like a childhood dream of mine. So now working on a nice indie type game called Combustion, which is like from the PlayStation 1 area style. It's like a mixture of Metal Gear Solid and Final Fantasy 7 and all those great ideas put into a new format, and with lots of like retro callback, and with a great engaging story. And so I'm very happy. So I'm not only playing games but making games. So that's
perfect.
my status now.
You answered my follow-up question, was how did it lead to how did you find yourself in the world of 3D or not 3D? I was thinking for some reason you're just talking about that thing. I was like, my brain was going 3D. How do you that? And that's how you found your way into the world of like making sounds for games.
Yeah, absolutely.
And doing sound design in games and I think that's like it's a weird thing to say that I think it benefits people. I think the industry to have more like, hey, I'm just a sound designer for hire, or
Hmm.
not like so strictly working at studios, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like working for companies, kind of like drifting from project to project, which I feel like in a lot of other art fields, people usually do drift from like project to project. It's like not a company every time,
Yeah, exactly. And that's also like the way I'd like it to be because, as you also talked about before with Karina, like those cycles of developing games for 7 or 8 years, that's not really something that interests me.
Right.
I'm more interested in those like smaller projects. I mean, I could also see myself taking part in those longer form projects, but then um, most of the time for those games, it starts to change, fortunately, but a lot of the time it was like the game is almost finished, now we need sound for it, and then you get a sound designer on board that's just plugging in sounds there.
Yeah.
But where it's really fun, especially in the indie scene, is where you talk together with all the developers and you're a part of the team and you inform each other's decisions. And so maybe you make a sound and then someone makes an animation based off that sound, or someone designs a creature and you make the sound and then they change it and then you change it, and then like you create something really together and something really grounded in like a creative process.
Yeah.
And I feel that's getting more and more and better, and you can even see that in like in the big movies. Dune, for example, is one of my favorite new movies that came out, and there it's like the sound team was right at the beginning when they were still like changing the script. They were involved and in the process, and there's even this one part that the sound of the worm was there long before the VFX was there. So they talked with the director and with everyone about how the worm should sound and how it's physically like structured, and then they created that sound, and then they made the animation out of that, and that's why it all sounds so intense. And I mean, it's one of the best sounding movies ever. So if you haven't seen Dune and you
No,
like good sound, I really
I've
recommend it.
I've only seen the original
Yeah,
that
David Lynch one. Yeah.
that Lynch one. I saw that documentary of Jodorowsky's Dune,
Oh yeah. Okay.
which is
Yeah, I
kind
mean,
of
it's all crazy stuff. I mean, but
yeah.
the new one, I had like medium hopes, but then I mean, Denis Villeneuve, the director, did some great stuff with the other films he did. So I was hoping like it would have been like at least a decent movie, but I was blown away. Like especially, I mean, of course, because of the sound, and that was like the main drive for me. But you could really tell it felt so immersive. And afterwards, I watched the documentary, and they talked about that they gave essentially the sound team um, the brief that it should sound like a documentary, and like it's not a science fiction film. It's like you put a documentary crew on Arrakis on the Dune planet. So how would that sound like? And
Yeah.
that's why you have such interesting choices and such interesting sounds. And it's blown away, and I'm so looking forward to the second one and listening to it in the theater. Yeah.
Well, perfect. Well, perfect. So, and you, that's actually a perfect encapsulation of the whole segment, which we are at the end of, Ben. Glad to have you on the show. I like that form is like, listen, to find people outside of direct Indiepocalypse is trickier because I have to look them up, and then I'm like, do they even know what this is? So glad you filled out the form. Glad you're here. It is a great way to just sort of like, this whole show is the idea of like getting a bunch of people in rooms together, and I'm glad you're like, hey, can I come in this room?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, and I'm really like as I said, just blown away and looking forward to checking out on all the episodes I've missed so far. So
well, you've missed 111 so far.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to pick and choose probably because sound is my daily work. So at some point my ears are just done.
Yes, and I run long sometimes, but I like this show is I like to think it's a very in the moment. It's for us four here hanging out, and then sometimes people listen to it during and after the fact, but speaking of us four, we're gonna get to that fourth person in a second. But I want to thank you again before we go on break, and then I'll be back in like a minute 51, give or take. Goodbye. Hello and welcome back to Indiepocalypse Radio. That was Die in Vain. Yes, with Desperate to Piss. I was like, I was worried about flipping the in and the two there for a second. But then Die to Vain, I guess, does make a little sense. Though Desperate and Piss sometimes makes sense. Who knows? Anyway, song names aside, we are here with our next guest, who you may know from issue 41 of Indiepocalypse, the newest, the freshest stuff. We got the new crew here with Boss Fight. She Loved You. It's Lily Dietrich. Hello.
Lou, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. That's a question I like to ask. I'm startled to have it reversed on me. No, that's like, why do I say that at the beginning of every thing? And it's kind of like, it's my word to say that I'm talking to somebody. It's like, we are initiating conversation now. Hello.
That's how I start every interview. It's works at job interviews sometimes.
Yes. I've done very few of those, fortunately, but unfortunately, depending on how you look at it. But, important question off the top. I got to ask. Whoa, no, I moved the order around too much on accident. I clicked on it. I'm so desperate to ask the question I haven't been able to ask it yet. Lily, how did you hear about Indiepocalypse?
So before I actually I still do this, but I before I was on Twitter because I thought Twitter was dumb, and then it's like, oh well, if you want to be a game developer, you have to have a Twitter, and it's like, okay, I'll have a Twitter. I don't use it meaningfully, but before I did that, I put a bunch of people's Twitter feeds in an RSS feed. I just have like an RSS stream of everyone that I follow, and so it popped up there. I have no clue who ended up putting it in there, but it ended up in there at some point. And then I submitted a game I did to the issue, and then you put it in the issue, and now we're here.
It's that is the first. A lot of people have come to it through Twitter, but through a personal RSS feed that is a Twitter thing. The first time that's happened, though, it's a good version, I think. It's a good way to use Twitter.
Yeah, well, and I put like YouTube channels and stuff. It's just a giant RSS feed because you can put like every website supports RSS. It's weird that every website supports RSS, but they all still do. And so I get like the news through the same thing that I get like YouTube recommendations for people who subscribed because we learned how to do RSS in like a Java class, and I wrote like a stupid little program to do that, and then I'm like, I'm just gonna keep using this forever. And then I kept using it forever because I didn't like have social media. Now I still only kind of have social media, so it's like I don't like the algorithmically getting content stuff.
Yeah,
because it's like because it's there to make you mad, and so it's like, well, I don't want that. I just want to get everything from the people who are saying things in order of when they said the things, and so I have it set up to do that, which is much nicer, I think.
Yeah, the people who use the For You feed are truly mad. I will delve into it occasionally because I'm fascinated by it, because it is like you said, it is for making you mad, or it is for like engagement content. It is like it is the stuff that is it's a place for posters, people who presumably do things, but I don't think they do anything else except for post. I guess technically those are considered influencers.
Yeah, I'm baffled, but and then you go on Twitter and it's like, well, what's at the side of the screen? Oh, it's what's trending, and what's trending is always just people yelling at each other, and so it's like, okay, yeah, I don't think I need to interface with the Twitter application itself. I think we can just keep using the RSS feed, and I technically have a Twitter. But
yes, I am the same. 2.5 weeks out of every month, and then I trudge myself over there to promote Indiepocalypse, and then I'm like, well, I'm done with that thing. I keep it there because I feel like I'm, it's business obligations, but I usually get very tired. I look and I get very tired. I'm like, why am I looking at this?
Yeah, that's kind of been my experience with social media in general.
Yeah.
So and the other thing is like I like vaguely understand how this stuff works.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, what? Because you can just look at it. Like Facebook has a number of documents they put out. It's like, well, what do people look at? And it's like, well, it's the stuff that makes them angry. And it's like, so they know. So why am I going to interact with the system that makes you angry? Why would I willingly do that to myself? Like it's a box to make you angry. That's all it does. And so I don't understand it, to be honest. But it works. It makes the money. It's just not my favorite way to make money.
No.
Like I feel like it's vaguely unethical, but I probably shouldn't be saying things like that. I'm going into software development. There's not a lot of jobs in software development that aren't vaguely unethical, but these things happen.
Right. Well, listen, there's a lot of jobs that are questionably ethical everywhere. So you're in pleasant company there, which is to say a person who has to do a job for a living. But yeah, that is very much like, you're right. Is this? I don't care much for social media, and I wish. This is how I prefer to interact with people, which is I invent a radio show and invite them onto it once a week, and that's my social interaction. I guess I understand how for some people it's like, oh, this is how I met friends, but I'm like, you can just talk to them privately though.
Yeah.
If Twitter goes away, there's like 8 million ways that you can just talk. A friend group used to use Facebook, a secret Facebook group, and now none of us even have Facebook accounts, I don't think. But
yeah, it's texting and email are really the ways that we set up for that, because there's no way for like a company to come by and go like, oh, we're gonna mess this up really bad. Like it's email. It's gonna be the same forever, because it's been the same since they invented the internet. There's not like much you can add to it.
Yeah.
So that's what I tend to use, but
it is like I wonder that constantly when people go, oh no, how am I gonna, if Twitter is no use, well, how am I gonna contact people anymore? It's like, what about email? It still works. It works. It's like RSS. It still works.
Yeah. I'm fascinated that RSS still works. I'm fascinated that anyone bothers to support RSS, because I've never met anyone who uses RSS.
Right.
I get that I also go to college with a bunch of other like 20-year-olds, so it would be weird if everyone else was using RSS, but it's also really weird that they taught RSS, right? That's because like I learned about RSS when they taught us how to implement RSS in Java. That was a weird thing to teach. I'm just now realizing, except that was about generalized software architecture stuff, but it's still fascinating that they taught that in the first place.
I wonder if it's just like, it's either like a holdover, or it's just like this professor is like, no, I think RSS is still good, so I'm going to keep teaching it to people.
Oh, it's not the professor, because the professor doesn't write the curriculum. It's like the curriculum's like on our campus's website, and then it's like a very generalized thing, because every campus, because I go to like a state college, so they have a bunch of like offshoot campuses. All of them have to have the same material for computer science stuff, because computer science stuff is actually like weird to teach in a number of ways.
Right.
And so they're trying to standardize it as much as possible, because it is extremely difficult to tell if someone is learning computer science properly.
Right.
And so it's a really good program. I feel like I've learned more in it about game development than I have in any game development class or tutorial I've ever seen. So like, it's valuable to learn the generalized stuff, I think, more so than learning the engine specific stuff, because the engine specific stuff fades. That's going to change with time. Unity's already, I mean, everything I learned about Unity for back in the day is like different now. But all the C# stuff is the same.
Yeah. So if you just learn C#, you could you'll get by probably far enough, or it's easier to pick up the Unity details or any other thing that uses C# or a C# adjacent language that you can teach yourself. But speaking of games, I mentioned at the top that you made a game. Tell me about Boss Fight, She Loved You.
That's a question I've been asking myself, because it's wait, actually, before we start, I have a question. When you opened the first door, did you die immediately?
I did, certainly, and then I learned my lesson.
Yes. That happens to every playtester, and I refuse to change it. It's great. I love that happens every time.
Yeah.
Every single time they die on the first door. It's like such a weird way to teach that. But like that's also what happens in like Mario, like the first Super Mario. It's what happens when you die to the first Goomba.
Right.
It's like,
right.
oh yeah, that's how do you teach people? Well, you just hit them really hard, and they'll learn.
Yeah, it's not like because it's not like you have to redo the entire game again. You just you're right back in there. You give it another go.
Right. The game is so weird. It like stops being. I don't know. I assume you got stuck on either level 1 or 2 because everyone gets stuck on either level 1 or 2. Did that happen?
I believe so. Like I will. Here's an Indiepocalypse secret. Sometimes I'll see a game and it'll be like 8 hours long, and I'll be like, I'm very busy, but I can usually tell that if something vibes with Indiepocalypse and vibes with me from like an initial hour or so, and I'll be like, yeah, that's good stuff. I'll get back to finishing it later.
That's not a condemnation or anything.
Yeah.
There's most people get stuck on level like my dad hasn't beat the game yet because he got stuck on the office level, and it's like, yeah, that's what's supposed to happen. Kind of. It's like I make my games like really difficult for some reason, and I'm not sure why I do that, but I do that, and I'm going to continue doing that forever because it's like I play like Kaizo Mario hacks for fun,
right?
So
right.
it's that's the environment I'm coming from, and so it's like, yeah, I like it when a game is difficult in a way that's not fair or enjoyable. Like that's my vibe.
I'm going through after this show, even after I get food, I'm gonna go back into Kingsfield 2. I'm going through like a FromSoft chronological dive.
Oh, I've been playing Elden Ring, but it's the only FromSoft game I've actually played because I played Elden Ring, and then people are like, "Well, this one's harder than Dark Souls," and it's like, "Well, I'm not going to go back and play Dark Souls then if this one was harder than Dark Souls."
If you want,
because Elden Ring wasn't that hard, and so it's like I don't. And I hadn't played any games of that type yet. It's cool. I didn't do the armor thing. Like you're supposed to put armor on your character, but then I didn't like that the character looked dumb when they were wearing the armor. So I just was like, I just wore whatever looked the coolest for the whole playthrough, and then it's like, and then I looked it up, and it turns out armor's not even that good. So it's like I don't understand why they would design the game so that if you have the best stats, you look dumb.
Yes.
That's a weird decision in my opinion.
That is fashion design in game, or like fashion equipment, like maximizing your invisible fashion stat is an approach to games that I think about sometimes. Like, I don't want to change this character's armor because it looks stupid now.
Yeah, no, I fully will take any debuff so long as it makes my character look cooler.
Right.
Which is really a fascinating thing to do, and it's also why I don't like the thing people say where it's like, well, this game has microtransactions, but they're just cosmetic, and it's like, well, I play the game for cosmetics. I like cosmetics.
You're right.
So I'm not going to play the game if the microtransactions are just for cosmetic stuff. That might as well. It's the same as if it's gameplay stuff in my mind. Like it's like the cosmetics aren't not important,
Yeah, because that's. In playing these FromSoft games, I get a crusade I'll go on one of these days is I think we define game genres too much by their gameplay style and not like their vibe enough, I guess, if that makes sense. They're not like they're like the whole package. So we'll say, oh, this game is this way because this is how you play it. But like Meat Boy is not the same thing as Mario, even though they're both platformers.
Yeah, I actually think I'm of the opinion that we should just be taking movie genres and applying them to games.
Yeah.
Which has kind of unfortunately been my approach. I think the only genre that I actually can put my game in is yaoi, which is a book genre. That's not an actual it's technically a tag on itch.io, but it's a weird one for a third-person shooter to be.
Right. One expects a visual novel, more traditional Renpai, a visual novel to be in there, kind of like the video game extension of a book.
Yeah, I front-loaded it instead with like an hour and 20 minutes of intentionally not fun third-person shooting.
Yes.
Where the conceit is like your character is like at work, and so it's like, oh well, you're doing the stuff you do in video games. You're fighting a monster, but they're at work, so they're not like enjoying it.
Yes.
And then did you get to the part in the I do a thing where I just will hard cut to a conversation that's happening on break if you've destroyed enough of the enemy.
I believe
which
so.
is such
I did get pretty far, relatively speaking, I believe, within that large building.
Oh yeah, the office level was actually one of the first levels I designed too, so it's like not great, it's not the order you're supposed to do things in, but I literally developed the game like mostly in the order that it happens in, which is you're supposed to go opposite. You're supposed to design the first level last is the thing, but I did the third person shooting stuff first. I was actually at my college had like a research colloquium thing where they like show off undergrad research, which meant like there were people showing off like peer-reviewed cancer research that they wrote, and I was here with the video game.
Yeah, well, video games have their important place within the peer review field, of course.
It's so weird that they let me go to that, but I think they removed me from the website too because the game came out and it's like, oh, this description says it's yaoi. Maybe we don't need to be advertising this on our school website, but I have pictures to prove I was there.
Yeah, somebody clicked on. Somebody's like, "Well, what does this yaoi word mean?"
And they're like, obviously, I was only showing off the third-person shooter segments at the actual event because that would be weird otherwise. But it's very funny that I got to go to that. But it's the other thing is that it just stops being a third-person shooter in Act 1, like halfway through Act 1. It just stops. That never comes back, which is a weird design decision. And there's like a number of other things it does where it just like becomes just becomes a game of a very specific genre for like a bit, and then those mechanics get completely abandoned forever, which is a weird way of doing game design, but it's the thing that I do. And I'm not going to I take a very maximalist approach to art, which is vaguely insufferable, but it's I like it anyways, because
No, I'll tell you another game that took that design approach, Final Fantasy VII. Maybe you've heard of it. I think that worked out pretty well for it.
Yeah, they remade that recently, didn't they? I've been meaning to play that, but that I don't have a lot of time because I take the approach to game development that I do.
Right. You're a student and also do game development and also have to live a life. Yeah, you have to really carve out very specific time if you want to actually play games.
Been playing Elden Ring, and then every time I do that, I like feel bad about it because I'm wasting my time.
Right. There's that is a sentiment that I've found in terms of like when people say they're like when I go to like more art events and people are like they're not gamers, the reason for it is more something like is that lifestyle approach or like that time wasting approach. They're like, oh, I'm not into this because it takes forever, or it's like I'm not gonna spend 80 hours on just to play one video game.
It is weird how long AAA games have gotten. The most recent one that wasn't Elden Ring I played was probably Far Cry 5 or the one after that. And those games just like take forever, but it doesn't feel like it needed to take forever when you play.
Right.
Like I feel like Far Cry 5 could have been 6 hours long, and it probably would have been a better game for being 6 hours long.
Yeah, there's like the explosion of the side quest that every game has side quests, you know.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And
oh, you go.
No, I was just saying, objectives and crafting and a lot of it is like not very good, or it's like fine.
Yeah, no, and that's the Ubisoft design is that thing, which is I've played so many Ubisoft games, and I don't know why, because I'm always disappointed by them.
I'm someone who at one point in life, when I was a younger man, collected all the feathers in the second Assassin's Creed. You know, sometimes you just
oh my gosh,
you just do stuff like that. You know.
Yeah. I don't do the collectibles usually. Usually, I just mainline the story quests and then quit because I can't. I don't understand collectibles in games.
Yeah.
I don't get them because they don't like ever do anything for the character, and when they do something, it's always like, well, it's 100 identical collectibles, and then you collect 50 of them, and we give you a thing, and it's like, why not just put the thing in a chest somewhere and let me find it instead of finding the 50 whatevers first? Like I think that's why I like Elden Ring, because they literally do just put all the things in a chest somewhere, and then you get the item. There's very little like collect all this nonsense to get a whatever that's exclusive. It's like, well, there's the one currency, and you can use that to buy some things, or you find weapons.
Yeah, I think that is a kind of like a through line of like FromSoft design philosophy of like it's like they dip their toe in this sort of open world video games, but I mean a lot of their games are always like open world in a way.
Yeah.
But I also realized like that's why they have their weird shoulder like controls and attacks and everything. Because I was like, I was playing Kingsfield. I'm like, oh right, there's no left right analog stick movement. It's all the rotation and looking is on the shoulders. So.
Weird.
And it's the same way in Armored Core, like their mech series. It's like it's all on the shoulders. So I guess if you're playing a FromSoft game, of course you're proficient in shoulder control.
Is that why all the attacks take? Is it because they make mech games? Is because like all the attacks take like forever to do?
Yes,
and so you like hit the button and then that makes sense, but that's so weird.
Yeah, they come from a very like a deliberate. I love kind of going back to. I'm trying to get into games that play bad, which is it's a mean pejorative. It's not really that, but it's more like games that feel uncomfortable at first, but then you realize you adjust very quickly because they're very intentional designs and it's like they're meant to be played. So there is a lot of like deliberate animation to them and like there's deliberate control and all this stuff, and I think the games are moving a little bit too far towards like this idea of correct design, and I'm like, no, there is no correct design.
Yeah, I definitely don't subscribe to correct design, or I wouldn't have done any of the things that I did in this game.
It was a treat, and that's why I'm like, yes, this is the stuff like of like it's the reason I make Indiepocalypse, you know. It's so stuff like boss fight can be in it.
I think having read Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, the Wittgenstein, his first work that's not the one he's famous for, because he's famous for Philosophical Investigations, which was the one that was actually correct. But TLP is more interesting, in my opinion, primarily because it's not correct in a number of ways, but some ways it is. So it's like weird and confusing, and you have to think about it. And he's trying to reduce all Like he's trying to reduce basically the universe and like all of philosophy down to math logic, which is such a weird thing to be trying to do because he was with he was with the early logical atomists like Bertrand Russell and there were other ones, but those are the two main ones.
Yeah.
But it's he was a part of that early school. And so I sort of built a lot of the game like just sort of assuming you've read that, which was not smart because not I don't know how many people have actually read that, but it's like it just sort of expects you to do that, and that's not smart or good game design in any capacity whatsoever. It's not even really good story design, but it does make it more interesting,
Yeah.
and that's really what I try and do.
Yeah, I think that's what's I think what you need in art is the artist's individual eccentricities, you know, more than like something that you think everyone. I would like it. I would always prefer like to be confused, but in a way that like I feel like I'm just like somebody's bringing something to the art that I don't know, and that's why I feel lost on this point. Not like, you know, I'm lost because it's confusing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely better to just be like, yeah, there's something they're doing something. I love art when I see it and I can't tell exactly what they're doing, but I know they're doing something. Like
Yeah.
I know it's based on something, but I cannot for the life of me tell what. Which is it's I don't know why I like that because half the time I don't like understand it completely,
Yeah.
and then I have to like Google it, and that's always fun because it's like research, but you have to do it for a book, and I love it when that happens.
Yeah.
Like people will bring up weird historical stuff, and it's like I have no clue what you're talking about. Let me Google some things, and then it's like it's like tricking you into learning.
Yeah, like listen, a piece of art you lack the context for is just another piece of art you get to experience to get that context.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all it's or you just need that perspective shift. It's that Linda Barry comic all over again, picking up the babies and looking at paintings.
Oh, I love that comic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I talk about it constantly on the show because it's such a perfect encapsulation of like looking at art, like learning how to view art differently. But this show is nothing about, if nothing, but teaching gamers to view art differently. Or Indiepocalypse in that genre. But Lily, we're gonna take a break.
Cool.
Our time flew by here, like it does with these segments. Glad to have you here.
It's good to be on the show.
Glad to have you on the show and the zine. Sorry, I cursed you to perhaps curse you to making a social media handle.
I was probably going to end up doing it anyways because
Yeah.
because
You
it's
have to.
the thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's how game developers meet each other, and I'm like in Ohio, so I
Right.
don't have a lot of game developers in the general vicinity of me in any
I
capacity.
I went to Ohio
So like,
once, twice
oh, you
actually.
shouldn't.
I went there
It's not
twice.
good here.
I went there. I went to Dayton and I went to Columbus.
Oh, that's the second one is where I go to school.
Oh no, that's wrong. I went to Akron.
Oh, I don't go to school in Akron.
I went to Akron and Columbus.
I don't remember what the deal with Akron is. I don't remember what the deal with most places
Right.
is. Ohio's kind of it's mostly just farms
Yeah.
and like the worst suburbs you've ever been to, where if you go slightly out of the suburbs, but like not still technically in the range of the suburbs, there's always like a miserable little town with one gas station, and if you go
Yeah.
there late at night, someone will threaten to kill you, and that's Ohio.
Perfect. I did a show at a museum in Akron. It's probably
Oh, that's fun.
it's probably my favorite show I've ever done because they paid me money, and
Oh, yeah, that's always good.
they also paid me. They paid me. What's the word when you get paid for travel? I got paid for travel. As well.
They like comp your travel time or something.
Yes. I thought there was a word. No, I was thinking of per diem, but they didn't give me a per diem. I wish they did. But anyway, we can talk all about the joys about Ohio, but we're going to go on break first, and we'll be back in like 2 minutes and 58 seconds. Goodbye. Welcome back to Indiepocalypse Radio. That was Self-Defense Family with Slavish Devotion to Form. We are here with 2/3 of our guests. Ben had to leave. The curse of not being a USer and it being later at night when you were in Europe. But Karina and Lily are still here. Hey, welcome back to the show.
Hi.
Hello.
I got a question here that I forgot to ask because it's not in my question form anymore, but I still like to know. So I'm like, why did it show up? Because I was in incognito mode. That's why I couldn't see my responses. But and the question is, I need to know: do either of you have a favorite Toho character?
Oh gosh, I don't think I remember any Toho characters.
No, this is not a question with a correct answer. It is often goes unanswered.
It will have to go unanswered.
I don't even know.
Okay.
What?
So,
I'm on the Wikipedia page now, and
yes.
I've like watched some of these anime, but like I don't know.
That's perfectly fine. That is.
Oh wait, are you looking at the? Are you looking at the Wikipedia page for the Bullet Hell series of video games? Is the one
I
you're
don't know
looking
what
for?
that is. Okay, then I have no idea what that is.
Okay, I've got to pronounce. See,
I thought you were like. I was like, I like Spy Family. Yes.
Yeah, no, I need to hit that. I need to hit that pronunciation better. It's like Toho. They're like there's a U at the end of each of them. Yeah,
I've never seen this in my life. Oh, this is cool. Okay.
Yes, Toho is very cool. It's basically a bullet hell series, but it's also like it encapsulates the indie spirit, where people can just like you could make a Toho game tomorrow and release it on Steam.
They have that weird licensing thing.
Yeah.
Where you could just like do that and the people won't sue you.
Yeah, the guy Zune is like fine with it. So it's like this weird kind of it's like people will say Marvel and DC Comics are our shared modern myths, but Toho is our shared modern myth. Or the closest thing, if you really want to get all uppity about turning IPs into common myths or whatever. But, they made a video game. Oh, Cliffhanger, that fake Lupin game. Anyway, I'm going to close that Toho, the TOHO Toho Wikipedia page. Anyway. Toho, Shrine Maidens, Eternal Vampires. It's cool. I think it's neat. But that all out of the way.
Check it out.
Yeah, if you're not into bullet hells, there's also a whole other world of cafe sims and visual novels and card games and who knows what else. But also the music is good.
Oh yeah, the music is very good.
The music is great stuff. If you're into that very specific type of... I think we were talking about this in the secret pre-recording section, but if you're into what Toby Fox does, you're into what Toho does in terms of music. But anyway, video games. We're talking about video games. Those guys. Mario, huh? He's been up to stuff. What do you think about that guy? He's little. He's a plumber.
I have no clue who Mario is. I'm not familiar with this. This is not a character ever heard of.
He's a little guy. He's like the prototypical little guy who runs around.
Little guy runs around.
Yeah. He sometimes has friends that he runs around with.
Sometimes jumps. Little guy jumps.
The reason I got into game development was because of WarioWare DIY, which I played when I was like 8, and I was like, oh, you can make little mini games, and then I'm like, I want to do this forever, and then I spent like 13 years learning how to actually do that.
Yeah, that is my first touch with game design was StarCraft, and I was playing with like the little, because they have their map editors, but you can set a lot of like custom flags and triggers and all sorts of stuff. So it's
I have a friend who does that. Because they make all those like really complicated mini games in StarCraft.
Yeah, it was even like in the original one or StarCraft 2.
I think the new one probably.
Okay. Yeah, because in the original, I think it was even like there was all sorts of like hacks for it, so you could do things what the editor wasn't supposed to do.
Oh, that's fun.
Like, but you could. So there was, I think a lot about. I've probably mentioned this on the show before, but there was a version of it that was like Final Fantasy, and so like you would run around with a little invincible character on the map, and then when you would run into different enemies on the map, it would zoom into like lock your camera into this corner that is the battle zone, as if you were entering a random battle. Then your characters would fight within that zone, and it was like very weird a thing to be make inside of like a RTS, but they made it, and like people made a lot of really weird stuff in that.
I always love it when people use tools to do things that those tools absolutely should not be
Yeah.
used to do. Like I was into because I'm 21, so I
Yes.
learned video games through Scratch, which is like, do you even know what that is?
Yeah, that's that MIT thing, right?
Yeah, that's the MIT thing. That's how I like initially learned how to write code, which is I don't know if it's a great way to initially learn how to write code, but it kind of worked. I'm in college for it, so
Right.
but it's people would do people still do stuff with that because people now the game is like, well, what's the most complicated thing you can do with that engine? And they've not found a ceiling to that because people are doing like fully 3D rendered games, but like the line renderer has to do it, so like you have to like draw the lines out and do all the matrix math, and it's like, oh, this is a lot of linear algebra in Scratch, a tool for 7-year-olds.
Yeah, well, you know what else is a tool for 7-year-olds? Paint.
Mm.
There's like, I think that's like the ideal form of like game design and stuff, which is like, yes, 7-year-olds could use this. It is like accessible, like almost immediately. So then there's a lot of people finding what is the upper limit of art, of the medium. And you go, oh,
Yeah.
you can paint more than still life paintings, huh?
Oh, speaking of paintings, I've been getting really into Anish Kapoor is I don't know if he did paintings indefinitely, but he's
Yeah.
started doing paintings. They are so good. It's great because he's an installation artist, so he's not even
Yeah.
like a painter by trade, but he's so good.
Right. He's the bean guy, right?
Yeah, he's the bean guy. I love him.
Yeah, I wanna get more games in this high art world that is like ultra abstract. But like the thing is like, I've said this before, like for as abstract as like as much as people poke fun at like high art or whatever, I think like when you get there, when you get in front of it, I think more people are like way more willing to engage with it than they think they are.
Yeah, well, because people think there's like a thing that's supposed to, like, you're supposed to understand the art. Like, they look at it the way that you look at, like, a math problem, like, you're
Right.
supposed to solve it. It's like, no, you just look at the thing and feel the emotions you're feeling. You can't mess it up. Like, you didn't.
Yeah.
You can't look at a painting wrong. Like people put all this pressure on it, and then they don't have fun at the museum. And it's like, no, you just look at the thing and then feel the thing you're supposed to feel. And if you're not feeling anything, move on to the next one.
Yeah. Right. Could you imagine leaving the MoMA and they give you a test?
I find that like a lot of my.
Oh, you go.
Sorry. No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I took a poetry class last semester, and the teacher said that the way that English teachers teach poetry is that they teach students to try and solve the poem, and that's a really bad way of teaching poetry. And so that's like one of the things he was trying to undo.
Yeah, I was gonna say that like my students, like they have like a predisposition anti any kind of art that isn't like hyper realistic, just like a person sitting on a chair and somebody else painted that person. Like even like I my favorite painting is called The Innocent Eye Test. It's like it's in the Met. It's my hand. I think it's amazing, and it is technically a realistic painting, but it's like of a cow looking at a painting of a cow, and like a bunch of scientists like watching the cow to see what the cow is going to do when it looks at the painting of the cow. Like, I love it. And I show it to my students, and like even that, like they're immediately like, no, I hate that. It's just like, oh, at least there's like some skill involved there. But they don't like the idea that like you can just feel something based on what you see, like just have an experience or not, and that's
right.
okay. But like they're like, no, I want to just see George Washington painted crossing the Delaware or whatever.
Right.
That's it.
I want to as he's feeling nothing there. He's just crossing a river. Nothing else is going on there. Of course.
Just Googled that painting. That painting is fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great painting. That's such a weird idea for a painting. I love that.
I know. I just like was like walking and came across it, and I was like, oh my god, I am the cow. I feel like the cow sometimes.
Right.
I love it.
And yeah, maybe that's their problem, the unwillingness to be the cow. They strictly want to be the scientist forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I talked about this last week. I had this weird like change in recent years where I started to realize that all animals are also little guys going about their business, just like me, except I just put a lot of bullshit on top of it. And so like, like, oh, that bird's just doing their thing. Their daily routine, and it's just like it's just like like a step away from the self to get intensely abstract about it. Maybe I think it's helpful to kill the main character in your brain that is you.
I mean, human beings are literally animals. Like,
yeah,
we have more complicated neurological structures, and we're capable of a higher thought that's substantially more complicated. But it's like we're the same thing ultimately.
Yeah.
Like it's the same classification of objects depending on how you divvy it up.
Me going to work and doing my spreadsheets isn't too different than the squirrel coming to get his seeds every day.
Yeah, that parses, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, that is that seems like a true challenge sometimes. What kind of class do you teach, Karina?
I teach a bunch of different classes. At this point, I primarily teach like programming and development, which like development being like a holistic, like
right.
You're going to be a solo indie dev in this class or like a small team and make everything in-house for your little game. But I also sometimes teach like game studies, like writing papers, like talking more theoretically about games and stuff, which is usually when this kind of conversation comes up because we try to make like connections to like other fields.
Yeah, and I think that is like, I think you're running into the most direct example of I think why games are so they have such a distance from some of the arts, despite that they've been around for quite a while.
Yeah,
and I think it is people coming from like this software problem solving kind of mentality.
Someone I know teaches like a history class, and the way they not just any history class, a games history class. Right. And the way they start it, kind of connecting back to like we are just animals. It's a video of a dog playing a game. Like the dog has a ball at like a little creek. It takes the ball upstream, puts the ball in the water, follows the ball down until it stops, picks it up, does it over and over again. And like in some ways, like play and games are some of like the oldest things we've ever done.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to like think about them that way, in addition to like the the really technical aspects of it that you can sort of get mired in.
Yeah, I had a moment, but just yesterday where I was at work and I was spinning a large rubber band on my finger, just like idly while I was doing something, and I thought, is this like, am I like a cat playing with a toy just on the floor, basically? I'm just like this kind of unconscious sort of desire to play. And it's like, wait a minute. But we have the beauty of abstracting art on top of it. But, as we have a computer science major in the chat, of course, that is the call. It is not, obviously, computer science does not equate to I'm never going to engage with art.
Also, I'm a
Yeah.
computer science major, but like half of the computer science majors I'm with do genuinely take the I'm never going to engage with
Right,
art
right.
approach. So it's like,
Yeah.
I understand why there's a reputation for that.
Yeah, it's a broad brush, but I'm not saying every computer science. Like, I think there are plenty of people who are, but I think that's why you have a large, why art games, quote unquote, don't have that same kind of meaningful foothold. Like, art house is not like as strong a genre within games compared to other mediums, perhaps.
Yeah, well, I don't. Are there any genres where like really experimental art house stuff is like the most popular stuff?
No,
Because
no.
like,
Oh no.
But there's room still. I think but maybe that's also because the medium's still young. Maybe.
yeah, yeah. Well, and it's like we think about like, oh well, why haven't video games had their Citizen Kane yet? But like at this point in the development of movies hadn't even had Citizen Kane yet.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Like if you go back and actually look at movies that were released before the point in time that video games are at now, assuming we start in like I think I usually put the point at like the early 80s.
Right.
We in theory we're still in like the very very early phases where like the best movies coming out are like Dracula. So like
Yeah.
it makes sense, I think, intuitively why we're not there yet as a medium as far as like broad artistic expression in art and like really powerful artistic expression in art, but also there's a lot of technical challenges in making
Yes.
a full video game. Like it's like just like stupid nonsense. Like I want the characters to hold hands. Good
Right.
luck with
Yeah.
that.
Right. Right. But if you were to film that, just hey, you two people hold hands.
Right. So there's kind of a lot of stuff you get for free. It's the thing that I always say is that the stuff that's easy to do in movies is the stuff that's the hardest to do in video games, and
Yeah.
vice versa.
Right. Right.
Because like in video games, all video games are like, well, it's a giant robot that destroys 90 buildings, and that's not that hard to do. But if you want to have two people like in a room talking to each other,
Yeah.
that is a miserable challenge.
Right, and the same way in film, I saw like when I watched that first. I say first, but there's like the first new Spider-Man, and there was like a moment of CG. I was like, "This looks bad. This looks so out of place." Video games are yet. I know I'm not. We're not even up to Dracula par because for all the games we have about vampires, I have still not seen a little bee go into a coffin yet. And until we have little bees in coffins and vampire armadillos or whatever, we will never truly reach Dracula level of.
Right.
I think about that little bee a lot. If you've never seen Dracula, at one point, when he goes to Dracula's castle, the Children of the Night, what sweet music they make. There's all the Children of the Night, and one of them is like a little bee, and he has a little bee-sized coffin. I don't know why, but it's funny to me.
That's amazing.
Also, like I recently watched Bram Stoker's Dracula. The what's his face? How did I forget his name? The guy Coppola Dracula, and what a damn good looking movie. That's all I have to say about that. That's it. There was no end to that thought. I just think the costume design in that movie is out of this world. But
yeah, I mean, sometimes there doesn't need to be
Yeah.
more thought there.
yeah, just like if you're listening to this, just look up Bram Stoker's Dracula and just look at like the armor and just like any design of like that is in that movie. Just like Dracula with his crazy hair, just a visual splendor of a movie. But I believe it won an Academy Award for that. I was actually talking to someone recently about this whole idea of like, we have gaming's Oscars, the Game Awards.
I don't think I understand the point of the Game Awards, to be honest.
More places to put video game commercials.
Yeah, advertisements.
Oh, okay.
No, I haven't because I'm been on cinema brained. I haven't watched the actual Oscars in a very long time. Or not that I think I really did beforehand, but they don't have like trailers constantly during the Oscars, right?
No, and also usually the movies that get I mean, the movie that wins the Oscar isn't always good, but
Yeah.
like usually it's like movies that like you look at it and go, yeah, it makes sense that this is here. Like
Right.
Shape of Water, it made sense for that to get nominated. I don't remember if it won, but like it made sense intuitively. Like you look
Yeah.
at that and go, yeah, that should be here. With the Game Awards, half the time it's like, what's here? And it's like Far Cry 5, and it's like, why are you here at this event?
Right.
Why?
It's a very like, but no, they bring out actors too, though. Sometimes, so they're serious like movies.
Yeah, it's the Game Awards are weird to me.
But the thing we noticed about it is that I was looking at the categories because I was doing this thing like I'm doing right now where I'm idly talking about it, and I was searching it because I have two monitors and an overactive brain. And I noticed that if you look at the winners, aside from the actors and the composers, it doesn't name any. There are no people's names on those awards.
Oh wow, yeah,
Oof.
that's insufferable.
And that's
Also, like, it's like you look at the games that won 2022. Elden Ring won Game of the Year. That's a good game. I don't think that I would call that Game of the Year because I would call Game of the Year probably a smaller indie thing. Like
Right.
like I know they put a lot of effort into it, but it's huge. But also past the halfway point, the fact that it is huge does not improve the experience. I just want the game to be over, and it's not. Like
Right.
it's so long for no reason.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. Like the Gamers Association with like length. I mean,
Also,
it's
they
good.
have an award. They have an award for anticipated game.
Yes.
They have an award for game that's not out. Could you imagine if the Oscars did that?
The most anticipated award goes to Asteroid City. Can't wait to see it next year. That is very funny.
You do not get to call yourself a real award ceremony if one of your awards is for a thing that's not out yet.
What do we have the most hype for? Tears of the that's part of video games feeling very like decided by commercial spending, Like,
Also, one of them is family game, and that's a weird category. That's not a category. Do the Oscars have like a best movie rated PG category? That feels weird, right?
right. Yeah, they don't. They have. I don't think they even have best family movie. Let's go to the Oscars. Not Oscars, the restaurant. In Dedham, I'm looking for Oscars. The Academy Awards.
Because most of the awards for the Oscars are for like very specific stuff, like best supporting actor. But
Right.
like the score gets an award every year.
Right. Best direct. I mean, that's part of our conversation that we were having I was having with someone. Is like these are awards for people, largely.
Yeah, like production design, makeup, and hairstyling. You know what you don't see in like game awards? You don't see stuff pointing out specific things like that. You don't see like, oh well, the best use of algorithms. And I get that that's a
Right.
weirdly specific one that you probably couldn't do because you'd have to decompile the games. But
Or-
like, it feels like there should be stuff like that, like best VFX artists or something.
Or even something is brought as best level design.
Yeah. Or is there even a category for best soundtrack in the Game Awards or best sound design? Because
I
there
believe
should
so.
be.
I think that's the one where the person actually gets named. Best audio design.
Best audio design, and they have art direction,
Yeah.
which went to Elden Ring, which is a weird decision, actually, now that I think about it. Why did Elden Ring get art direction?
I like the I don't know.
It had very good art direction, but I don't know if I would give it the best art direction of that year, since it was just doing the kind of like, well, we're gonna make the game look kind of realistic.
Right.
Like that's the art direction there. That's the art direction of a lot of AAA games. It felt kind of similar to every AAA fantasy game. So it's like it's weird that it would get that, but also I think I think people were how long did that game take to develop anyways? I remember hearing someone telling me about that game before I knew what it was, and it's like that was like a while ago. So that game, people have been hyping that up forever. So I guess it makes sense that it would get a bunch of awards when it came out.
Yeah, and it's like the culmination of Soulsborne design or whatever,
Yeah.
Of all this FromSoft thing. And George R.R. Martin wrote stuff on it.
I don't entirely know what he did on that game, but he should have deleted Horalu, which is the dumbest character.
Yeah,
just get rid of that one.
Best debut indie.
They have a category for that? That's fun.
Yeah, best, which is like, I wonder if it's like the weird best new artist thing where it's like their third album they win best new artist because it's this is when they broke through to the mainstream a little bit. I feel like there's
they have a category for independent game, and that went to Stray, which makes sense.
Yeah,
I feel like it's gonna be like AA games.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah. The best new indie, which is the one that goes to Annapurna Interactive every single year.
Yeah. In their defense, though, they did put Blue 12 Studio and Annapurna on the credits. They didn't just put Annapurna.
Oh, that's good.
Which is like a whole other issue where publishers are kind of like, but that's the thing. Like, how many of these people survive like the to make a second game? They kind of like make a game and then it becomes like, so many people call them Annapurna games,
Yeah.
Yeah, they've definitely got a specific vibe that they go for.
Also, best content creator of the year. When is the Oscar going to have the best content creator of the year?
I don't. Hopefully never. I don't.
Best film
best
YouTuber.
Esports player. That's such a weird category. It's esports player.
Yes. Yeah.
That's insane. That's a category for it. This is the Video Game Awards, and it's like, we're also imagine if they had best moviegoer as an award at the Oscars.
Right. or even it's so very weird. Like, but I don't think DICE or like any of the other awards are even really that much better about this kind of thing.
I didn't even know there were other awards, to be honest.
There are, but I don't think any of them are also like, oh, okay, so this is where you actually get technical awards, and that's the weird.
It's hard to do technical awards because you have to hire people who like know what they're talking about specific fields, and that's always a mess. It's easier to do for the Oscars because there's so many people in it.
Yeah.
But like finding someone who's qualified enough to talk about like very specific technical stuff in that context in video games is like not an easy task, and most of the people who could do that are very busy all the time.
Yeah, it is. Sorry.
Oh, so I was just gonna say, to speak to that, I was like looking at the process for how the Game Awards like selects their nominees, and like they do have like a committee of like representatives from like Microsoft and Sony and stuff, but they make a committee of quote influential game news organizations, which I think that's a little weird. Like, it's like journalists and writers are choosing them, and they probably don't know a ton about like the sort of like technical and design and sort of like what is actually genuinely impressive for some of this stuff. It's kind of, I mean, I also think it's like consistent with what the purpose of the Game Awards.
Yes.
Clearly is.
Yeah.
Because it's very much extended PR, which not to be mean to games press.
No,
that's also like
I love them. Oh yeah.
The nature of the industry has turned most games press into extended PR teams.
Yeah.
just because it's like if you don't talk about Elden Ring, you don't have a job. So
yeah.
Yeah, a little bit fascinated by how both indie game developers and the press around video games and the people who work for AAA studios are just they're just all in a bad position right now.
Right.
Like the whole industry is
Yeah.
just like, what's going on? It's all messed up everywhere forever. And it's like, okay, cool. And it's entertainment too. Like it's not like that's not happening with movies and stuff,
Right,
but it's
right.
movies have unions is the
Yeah.
difference.
I think it's everyone is kind of like getting squeezed into nothingness, but games didn't have a good foundation pre-squeeze.
Yeah.
I just peeked. I'm like, I know it was like, was it every nominee? No, if you have any feature film credit, you can apply to vote in the Oscars, the Academy Awards. So there's like this Variety article from, where is this, 2020? There were 9,400 people eligible Oscar voters.
Wow.
Yeah. So you get like a much wider slew of people. And I wonder if that's part of why I did look. Best performer and best score are the only ones in which a human being is credited as having won.
That is unfortunate. And admittedly, well, I was going to say that. Well, I was going to go like, oh, well, games are made by a lot of people, but movies are made by a lot of people,
right.
And the Oscars does a good job crediting individual people. Maybe not as good as it could in theory do, but like it gives a lot of awards to individual people for specific parts of the movie. Like there are awards for costume design.
Yeah, there are still jokes about the on-air technical awards where they give like a million technical awards that never go on TV and don't get any focus at all. But at least like they exist. That's something.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of that is guild stuff, like underneath it, like how much of that is guild and union stuff, where it's like these technically, like I wonder if Christopher Judge here is a SAG, card carrying SAG member or something, so that's why he's like, no, if I win an award for best performance as Kratos, you don't give the award to Sony, you give to me, the guy who was Kratos, and that sort of thing. And then there's like it does feel like it is. I remember there was one year where I was trying to look up, or it might have been this year where I was trying to look at what I was talking about the Game Awards. Like I was going to look up, hey, let me look at the past future class, and I don't think you can. Which is also, what is that thing besides something you put in your Twitter bio? It's that's the other thing that feels very like a lip servicey to me. Like it's a those things you see from often organizations you've never heard about, but they want you to all submit people to this list,
I have no clue. I'm very outside of any industry stuff.
Yeah, it's hard to. I see them occasionally. People would be like, vote for me for this thing that I've never heard of, so that my name can go on a list on a website somewhere.
Oh, like just weird, like small award ceremonies and stuff.
Right. That seem to like sometimes serve the brand more than they serve like, I don't know, what do they do?
Yeah.
Like I am unsure what future class does. Besides make you one of 50 photos on a page.
I am also unaware of what Future Class does or is, and I've never heard of them.
You're not
I'm
reading.
Going to Google that now.
You're not reading people's Twitter bios enough. It's like
I am not on. If you'll recall, I use RSS feed. I don't.
It's very like it reminds you of like 30 under 30.
I'm looking at it now. It just seems like a thing to make the Game Awards look cool. And I'm sure many of these people, like I know some of these people, and they're really cool, genuinely talented and awesome people. But
that's part of my issue with it. Like these it feels more like the Game Awards just kind of co-opting people doing interesting work to be like,
Yeah.
look, we put their
Aren't
name in
we
their
great?
photos.
Yeah. Now about Elden Ring.
Yes. Right. Well, thank you to our future class, and just zips all 50 pictures by real quick. No. There is like at least one Indiepocalypse contributor on this list, even.
Oh.
Oh wow.
Yeah, there's like, like I said, Indiepocalypse is but a tiny part of people's game design journeys.
It is the reason that I made more money than I was expecting to make on the game I made.
Yes.
So that's
the a scary thing that I hear multiple times from people.
the figure I was using was that I assumed I would make about $12,
Yes.
and I made substantially more than $12. I made like almost 100, so that's like good for. I mean, it's better than I was expected to do, considering I was expected to be working for like completely free, and I was working for like like actual money that I can spend on things.
Right.
So that's cool.
Yeah, and Indiepocalypse is at a point now where it's like it's at 20 up front, but it's like a soft 60 or 80 because of the helpfulness of the Patreon being like a very consistent amount of money, So it is nice to be like, hey, everyone gets $60, which is not a lot of money, but you can buy pizza or something with that.
Yeah, I have it, I think, just sitting in my PayPal, and I plan to use it to buy video games at some point, probably.
Perfect. Yeah, and now you can look forward to, as Karina can attest, once or twice a year, you'll get a $6 from me in PayPal occasionally.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it happens very infrequently, but it does occasionally happen. I like the idea of royalties a lot.
Yeah, no, royalties are always good when you can like, because it's that's the thing that actors. Do actors get royalties? I've heard that they do, but I don't know if that's actually true.
That's part of why I liked it, and I wanted to I wanted so much to have royalties. Is I remember listening to when I listen to podcasts, I usually listen to LA comedy people podcast, That Sphere, and between writers and actors, I've heard them occasionally talk about like getting their 3-cent royalty checks or whatever from an episode of Just Shoot Me or something they did once. But yeah, that's what the strike is about. It's about partially a part of it is that they're changing the rules and stuff with residuals with regards to streaming and that kind of thing.
Oh, right.
So they're like, basically, when by changing the rules, I mean giving them less.
Yeah, I was like,
as always,
right.
Giving them as little as possible.
Right, they're like finding new technicalities in the contract. You'd be like, oh, because it's a streaming, you get less money now.
I heard stuff like, work nonstop for like 2 weeks, making like a 6-episode season, and then okay, you're paid, you're done.
Right.
Bye. That's it.
Right. Because they don't have the same syndication, like all that language around like syndication money and everything. It's a whole other disaster industry, for as bad as video games are,
everything is bad.
Yeah, everything. Turns out there are fat cats everywhere looking to lap up all the milk. But that's also as someone who is a cohabitant with a fat cat, I'll tell you, there's nobody more beautifully content with their lot in life than a fat cat. just hanging out there, and it's like, I've got people to take care of me. I don't have to hunt. But anyway, people ought to get more money. Bold stances here from. Oh, speaking of bold stances, bold times. My God, 2 hours. Yes. I didn't. Now this is the part where I say I ought to wind the show down, and then it takes a while to wind down. But if I don't say that I'm gonna wind it down, it will never get wound down. So I want to be. I definitely want to thank you both for being here. Thank Ben for being here as well, although Ben had to leave earlier. But Lily and Karina, thank you both for being here. Do you have any last pressing thoughts, matters, questions for anyone here? Perfect.
Not really.
No, that's good.
I'm gonna play Lily's game after this. I've never
Oh,
seen it. It
good
looks great.
luck.
I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yes.
Have fun getting stuck on level 1 or 2, which is what every playtester does.
Okay, cool. Looking forward to it.
But trust me when I tell you, even that level 1 or 2, you're like, it is more than enough to be fully on board with that game, and like
I'm sold.
Yeah, right. Sometimes you have to just like sit back and be like, I'll give. More games need to push you away from them, and like you have to come back to them later, and like in a different headspace sometimes. I think.
Yeah, it's definitely the vibe that I go for, because I play a lot of. I also got into I want to be the guy that, like, hacks, which is that is evil. It's always evil, and
right.
it's kind of sort of the thing that I'm trying to do, which is a weird thing to be trying to do, but it's other people are doing it, at least, so it's not literally just me making really difficult, unfair games.
Yeah, the Kaizo Masocore kind of subgenre. Were I to make games occasionally, it's a thing that I'm fascinated with. I think there was what's it called? Ares Action, I think is the name of it. It's like a Kaizo game, but it goes through like multiple genres.
Oh, that's fun.
Like it's that Kaizo sort of mentality, but there's like an RPG part at some point, though it is mostly a platformer. It's neat.
My game also has an RPG part at some point. Clearly, we are doing the same thing.
Yes, that's the. There's so much like space for like design. Yeah, there's like it is. I'm all for maximalist design, and just kind of like games that do everything. And because...
It also has an asteroid segment that is the worst. It's entirely insta-kill death lasers, but it's still like bullet hell attacks, and then you just sort of slide into the attacks because I've made the ship really floaty. It's like the worst.
That's there. We need more antagonist design occasionally.
My favorite kind of design.
Yeah.
When I hear designers say this part of my game is the worst, I am immediately like, I am so excited.
Yes. Yeah, no, before I wrote those two pieces about your game, I made sure to read like your entire like post-mortem you had written about 10 Mississippi. To be like, yeah, I want to also read this, so I want to make sure that I'm not just talking out my ass in some ways. And there is like and that it very much trades to some extent in a different style of like antagonistic design, but like maybe call it selfish design, who knows, but like
I'm fine with that label. I'm good.
This idea of like you're getting what I want you to get. Very
okay. I'm actually fascinated by this game. I'm going to also have to check out your game when I'm done with this.
Yes. Hey. I love it. I love the like Indiepocalypse.
Everyone play each other's games.
Yes, Indiepocalypse Radio, because that's the cool vibe of like local scenes and that kind of thing. Is people like just kind of checking out each other's stuff, But the internet can have a problem of flattening it to wanting to check out the things that people are talking about, And it's harder to check out like this person's game that maybe not everybody is talking about. But it's like, I want to check out, I listen to this person, I want to check out this stuff. I hope, I'm obviously biased in that I want people to check out the games in this. That's kind of like why I do it. Because it's like, the games are good. And that ought to be enough for you to be like, yeah, I want to, and most of these games don't take very long to play. Some multi-genre odysseys aside, perhaps, that may have a approximate length of 5 hours. But even like
I would have done the word count, but I formatted my dialogue system so stupid that I literally couldn't.
yeah.
Like it's I wrote my own dialogue system for that game, and then I have a different dialogue system I wrote for the game I'm currently working on because the old one was so awful, but it
Yeah.
was still better than what Unity tutorials will tell you to do, which is
Yeah.
write all of your dialogue in the editor, which is like the worst ever way to do that. And so it's fascinating. Like I've just been getting progressively better and better dialogue systems.
Yeah, that is. I've been like in the tiny moments where I find time to make games, I've been just building out one tiny little system, and like that's the entirety of that I do, just so you have it for later, you know.
Yeah. Oh man, I could talk about the dialogue system for way too long. It uses so C sharp, the
Yeah,
lambda expressions or whatever they do, they call them actions. And then if you put an action, like the name of an action after a line of dialogue, and you have to throw that action into a static class that just holds actions. If you just put it after the line of dialogue and then comma separate them, it'll just run all of the actions when the dialogue is over. So you can do like arbitrary, you can just put any code and that it'll just run from the dialogue system, but you don't have to like, you don't have to do a lot of fiddling with it because you just put the code in the scene somewhere and then it'll
yeah,
go, okay, well, this is the code that does the camera. And so you just type in like focus camera 5 and it'll focus the
yeah.
camera to 5. It's
Yes,
great.
yes.
It's such a good system.
I was hacking together something very similar when I was making my dialogue system in Game Maker, where I was like, there was like printing lines, but then I had like scene direction lines
Mm.
that would like direct character action and that kind of thing. It would move objects around and that sort of thing. It was okay. But anyway, speaking of these games and you wanting to play them, Lily, where could people find your games if they want to play them right now?
Hang on, let me get the link.
Oh, don't you worry
Uh,
about that. I got you covered there.
Oh.
I just need the link for the world in the audio world.
it should be on lilydietrich.itch.io. It's
Perfect.
the website.
Yes, and I've got the link down there in the chat if you're here live. But perfect. Yes, you've got that's where your games will be. Which where they are now. Karina, where can people find your work if they're looking to find it?
You can find it on Narnia, like Narnia, the fictional place,
Yeah.
but with a K, pop.itch.io.
Perfect. I went to your website first because
Oh, that's fine too. That's actually easier. It's K-pop, but spelled POPP.io.
Yes, I love it when people have their own websites. I encourage it. It's a great thing, even if it's like a simple bit of HTML, you know.
Yeah.
And your little pictures bounce around a little.
Yeah, I got some juice on my website.
Yeah, it's just like straight to the point, and also email right at the top. I do a lot of really creative work to find people's emails. And if you have an email on the internet and you have a game that I'm interested in, or if I'm looking to commission you as a developer, and you have an email somewhere on the internet, I guarantee you I will find it. So,
Making that easy to find. Number one tip, if there's any like aspiring game devs.
Yeah.
I went to my first GDC and I made business cards like a big girl and did not put my email on it. It was just my name. It was very stupid.
Right.
Yeah. Have that around.
Yeah, it just put an email. As someone who has their email plastered, not even with any of the fake dot or whatever, I just put it as is. I basically get no spam messages. So, like,
Nice.
if you just slap it on there, you don't have any issues, you know.
Yeah.
But that even if you're like, I don't want people emailing, make a business email, you know, make a business. It's good. This is just me telling people to make an email so I can find you. I don't have to DM you or whatever. I hate doing that. It doesn't format right. I can't put links in DMs. I hate it. But speaking of things I don't hate, Indiepocalypse. You can buy that at indiepocalypse.com. Both, and it doesn't even link to itch anymore. I have that on my own website. You can buy it there. Just like the whole ass download, you know. I was gonna say itch is also DRM free, but it's just a website you can buy. You can also buy these tapes that I'm holding up to my monitor that you can't see, but you can buy Indiepocalypse physical editions, which are they're like little USB sticks inside of a cassette case with nice little cover art on them of the game's cover, or that issue's cover. It's a cool, inexpensive way for game developers to sell games in a physical medium. I say that because I encourage game developers to give it a shot. You know, it's a way to get into like zine fests and art shows and like different like physical, usually very cheap physical gallery spaces, or not a gallery but like markets, which are usually like the two I go to are like $40. You got to bring your own table, but they're like $40, which is very cheap compared to like $500 or $2,000 or whatever. And if you're especially if you're in the alternative game space, gamers are probably a tough audience for you anyway. But that all said, you can buy it there. You can subscribe. Patreon, indiepocalypse.com/Patreon. It's cheaper if you get it yearly. You can also, that's a place where you can get, if you want to get purely the commissioned games every month at a lower, at a steal for $5, you can do that too. And when you buy, if you were to go out there and you were to buy issues like say 41 or 12, the guests here would eventually, if after enough people did that, would get like $6 through PayPal from me. I say 6 because it's my limit before I get like dinged by fees, because there's so many international guests. I go, it's got to be a $5 minimum, so that I still get something out of it. But it ends up going closer to 6. It ends up being pushed over there. So that's the old Indiepocalypse $6 promise. But all that aside, if you would want to be on the show because you're like, I made games, I want to be on Indiepocalypse Radio, I want to be inside of Indiepocalypse, you can submit your game very easily at indiepocalypse.com/submit. Aside from like a 12-hour window between when the submissions open and close, they're basically always open and always looking for games that you either just made 20 years ago. I don't really care. Games are games, you know? They're good. That's it, I believe. I think that's it. I don't think I have anything else to say. Buy games. Who knows? Karina, Lily, thank you both so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for making games. Thank you for being a part of Indiepocalypse. Glad to have you here. Glad to have you in the show. Glad to have you in the zine. With that, I'm going to do my thing where I find Foobar. Here it is. And I'm going to end the show. Goodbye, everyone.